as you're up and down. All right, welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. Let the record show that 3 members of the board are present, and Mr. Brett Lee is not present in this meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll deem the agenda approved. There's an opportunity for the public to comment on any item that doesn't appear on the agenda. Any public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Deemer, would you like to present our presenter for this presentation?
Yes, as on the agenda, we have a presentation this afternoon on our joint intake project. So I'd like to introduce Gary Rimps. Gary works for Reclamation District 2035 and is the project manager for the project. Gary has been in the water business for a long time, and most recently as the utilities director for the city of Sacramento. So we're happy to have Gary here this afternoon to tell us about the progress on the joint intake project.
Thanks, Dennis. Nice to be here, board members. I think the board has copies of this, hard copy of what I have up on the screen. I was going to give you just a brief status of where we are, and there's some pictures to look through. As Dennis said, the intake project is going, well, he didn't say this, but the intake project is going very well. We've been under construction, actual construction, since probably June. The contract was awarded in April. As you know, it's about a $44 million endeavor. And where we are right now is we have built the cofferdam, and we are excavating the soil within the cofferdam, which mostly is in a riverbed. You have to excavate that down to an elevation. About 15 feet of material gets removed. We will then drive 160 piles. That will be the support piles. And we will then pour an 8-foot concrete seal in it, and only then will we dewater and start to build up the structure from there. And so what I just described will happen probably over the next 6 months. Where we are right now is still excavating the material out of the cofferdam. And one of the things that has happened also is doing that is we had to do a fish rescue. So we have, as part of the agencies, once before the cofferdam could be closed, we kept one section open. We brought people out. We seined all and netted all the fish to get them out of the cofferdam. And before we closed it off, we had Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries observing all this. So we did not kill any salmon. We had no take. We didn't kill any endangered species. There were many fish in there, but they were all non-native species that are not endangered. That has happened. We continue to take water quality samples on a regular basis. We continue to coordinate with all of the agencies. And one thing that has happened, the only significant, we've had a number of change orders so far, which is to be expected. You know, a project this large, and certainly with underground work, because we're still at that stage where what we're doing we couldn't see before we started. Once we get up out of the ground, things will be much more certain. But we have had one significant change. All the foundation piles, round pipes, 18-inch pipes that we will drive to support the structure, the length of those, we put in 4 initial ones, and in fact, where's my pointer? If I don't blind Dennis, we'll be okay with this. So we have what we call indicator piles. You can see one right here, others you cannot see well. We went out and drove 4 piles as an indicator to see how deep they would go. They unfortunately all went deeper than we expected them to go. And so that did result in a significant change order because we had to buy longer pipe piles. We had to buy more steel. And there's going to be some additional cost of driving those piles. But most of the money, the additional money, is going to be in steel. What I will say is that cost really, it would have been the same whether it had been in the bid or not, because the extension of the cost was exactly the cost the steel that was part of the bid. So our contractor, Balfour Beatty, we had them actually supply us the cost that they had bid originally for their steel, and so the additional cost is the additional cost regardless. It's unfortunate it happened, but it didn't really cost us more than it would have anyway. Let's look at the pictures. What you see here is looking north just outside, that's the existing intake. This is the coffer dam. These here you see are round O piles or pipe piles, and in between that are what we call the sheet piles. These are sheet piles sticking up in the air that have not yet been driven. And so you have a pipe pile, and then 2 sheet piles, a pipe pile, and 2 sheet piles, all the way around. That's how we construct the coffer dam. This is just more of the same. You have a crane here. You have the actual pile driver right here. This is a vibratory hammer, which means it doesn't pound the pile, it actually vibrates and it pushes. Much less noise for the neighbors, much less disruption, but some of these piles did have to be put in place with a hammer, where we actually pound, just like you've seen the old pile hammer that makes a lot of noise. These are our foundation piles that we were able to bring in by rail car, save some money for that. And this is just that same view looking the other way. There's I-5 bridge right here. And this is our coffer dam almost completed. We take samples for water quality from a boat because there's no way to take it otherwise. I'll skip over these. This is just, and you can see this is our fish rescue. We have people in the water netting fish. There's an opening down at the far end that you cannot see. And just, I will go through these quickly. Scaffolding, it's the same thing you see. Inside the coffer dam, once it was completed, what we do is we have what we call the whalers, which are these steel here and a corner brace, and we have struts here. All of that gets welded into place. Again, this is to keep the coffer dam stable, because as we remove that material and the water inside is lower than the water outside, you have a great deal of pressure, and this just keeps everything held out. So we effectively have spent a lot of money building a structure, so we can now build a structure. There's your finished coffer dam, struts in place, excavator taking out the material. We got to excavate down about 15 feet, again, down below. We got deep enough, we had to start using the clamshell here, because it can no longer reach with the excavator. And then all that material is being removed is actually, we're spreading it, drying it, and storing it on a 3-acre site right across the road. It was something we did. We obtained that so we wouldn't have big haul routes. We wouldn't have to dispose of this material. That material can be reused. Some of it will be reused. Some of it will be left in place. And these last views are in another coffer dam. This is actually, if you're familiar with the site, and you may not be, just across the levee on the land side is the canal where RD 1000 discharges their water for their irrigation purposes. And there will be a new outlet structure there, and we are going to build another coffer dam, a much smaller one though, there so we can build that structure. So that's where we're at right now. That's just about done. I think other than that, I don't know if there's anything else, Dennis, that I missed you think we should cover, and if there's any questions from the board, Mr. Chamberlain.
Questions? No questions. Mr. Rentz, thank you very much.
My pleasure always. Thank you.
Okay. Tom?
There are some tall yellow poles on Road 22 opposite this site. Is this associated with this project?
Tall yellow poles opposite.
On Road 22 opposite this particular site. You see them as you come over the Elkhorn Bridge. There's about 6 or 8 of them in a row.
Yes, that is, there's the contractor is trying to bring in power supply, a new supply from PG&E, rather than they're working right now off of the existing PG&E, which supplies the existing pump station. They would like to have their own power supply, and that's what that is.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary, very much. Keep it moving, on time, on schedule, within budget.
I should mention that We are on time and on schedule, though we may not be quite on budget.
Yeah. All right, very good. I see our city clerk's here to hopefully administer the oath of office to Director Stallard, soon to be, and so why don't you come forward? Mayor Stallard will be our alternate on the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency Board.
Please say aye, state your name, and repeat after me.
I, Tom Stallard,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's what I would- Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have a consent agenda in front of us. Any member of the board wish to withdraw any item from the consent
Nope.
calendar?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent items. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Mr. Deemer, you ready to give us an update?
Where's the? Gotta hit this thing here. Here we go. Okay, Chairman Marble and board members, a brief presentation for you this afternoon. I think much like what you saw in Gary Rent's presentation, we're very much in the construction mode on our regional water facilities. First, I'd like to start with just an update on our financing. As previously reported, Woodland has finalized 2 SRF loan agreements, Safe Drinking Water Act loan agreements. The regional loan amount is $111 million, and there's a second loan between what used to be called the Health Department and the City of Woodland for $32 million. Both of those agreements are in place. We've submitted our initial claims in the amounts shown here, and the Health Department is in the process of reviewing and approving those initial claims. So shortly, Woodland should be receiving about $36 million in reimbursement funds. With respect to Davis, as we again previously reported, 2 loan applications have been submitted to the state board. The one is for the Davis' share of the regional facilities in the amount of $95.5 million, and another loan directly between the state board and the city of Davis for $35 million for their local facilities. Received some very good news in late September. The legislature passed and the governor signed AB 1478. And what that legislation did was clarify that the regional water project is eligible for SRF funding. With that determination and the governor's signature, the state board staff went to work to finalize the application, and that has been completed, and the consideration of the state board loan for the City of Davis's portion of the regional facilities is scheduled for the October 21st board meeting. So one of the things before we leave here today, what I'd like to do is get a sense as to which members of the board may be able to attend that meeting and to show support for that approval by the state board. We don't anticipate any problems at this point. Everything looks good, but we don't want to assume that. We want to make sure that we're well represented. In terms of the joint intake and our efforts to obtain grants, Again, we're seeking about $40.2 million in grant funding, 50% federal and 50% state, so $20.1 million from each. We're in very good shape on the federal side. $17.4 million has been appropriated to date. We've requested the final $2.7 million, and that revised agreement is being reviewed by USBR, and we're assured that, in terms of the money in the federal coffers, that money is available, and we don't anticipate problems with getting that full $20.1 million from the federal government. On the state side, you'll recall we did get $10 million last year from the Department of Water Resources. We have a $3 million grant with the Wildlife Conservation Board that is pending. So that is scheduled for their November 21st board meeting. They only meet quarterly. We're in the process now of gathering letters of support, and we're hoping that when we get closer to that date, we'll also be able to have some representatives attend that meeting and show support. In terms of the balance of the funding, we'll still be about a little over $7 million remaining on the state side, and it looks like our best opportunity is Proposition 1, which is the state water bond, assuming that that is passed by the voters in November. In terms of environmental and permitting, we spent a lot of time in the last few meetings talking about our permits. Happy to report that all of our permits are now in place. We did purchase mitigation credits associated with our biological opinion and our incidental take permit. Those mitigation credits have been purchased, and so that enables us to move forward and actually work in the field without concern for adverse impacts associated with threatened or endangered species. CH2M Hill is taking over in terms of the application for the actual construction permits, and they've been making steady progress. They obtained a encroachment permit from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and we are in the process of finalizing the encroachment permit with Yolo County. The agency started that process. CH2M Hill came in the last few months, and we have agreement on all of the key deal points, and so now it's just a matter of finalizing that permit. Ongoing, and which will continue all the way up until we start construction, until we start operation, is the permit to operate, which is necessary and needs to be obtained from the California Department of Public Health. And so that their review and their input into the process continues, and we continue to keep them apprised so that when we do get to the point of starting up operation, that permit is well understood by them, and they're able to issue it without delay or question. Utility coordination, some good news. We have confirmed with WAPA that we, the agency, are able to share in the WAPA power that is being provided, and it has been available at the intake to Reclamation District 2035. So that will mean very cheap power for the agency's electrical load at the intake. And WAPA has made a formal request to PG&E to upgrade the facilities that are necessary to support the new joint intake structure. So that effort and coordination with PG&E is moving along well. Energy efficiency, you had a report in on your consent calendar today, reporting on the energy efficiency analysis that Terra Verde did. They determined that the project as proposed and as designed is energy efficient, that the incentives that we provided are appropriate and will further incentivize CH2M Hill to minimize electricity use. And they also provided a very initial review of solar power options and what might be available there. Also, the agency, working with CH2M Hill, has submitted a PG&E Savings by Design program application, and we're anticipating fairly significant rebates from PG&E as a result of the high energy efficiency pumps and equipment, electrical equipment that we're providing on the project. Joint intake project, I won't say much here. I think Gary kind of summarized where we are, and as you saw in his presentation, the construction is in full swing on that project. In terms of our design and construction with CH2M Hill, again, making very steady and as anticipated progress. They submitted their 100% design documents for the regional treatment plant and for the off-site pipelines this week. That final submittal is under review. We anticipate having final approval of the design for all of the facilities on the project in the next couple of weeks. We continue to process their construction submittals and requests for information. That all is going smoothly. Through the end of September, the service contract is 16.2% complete, and we've been invoiced for about $26.5 million. Just want to stop and show you a few photos now. These are fairly recent, within the last week or 10 days. So you can see this is where they've set up their construction trailers. The agency has a construction trailer here, as well as our construction representative, Somas, and CH2M Hill, also located here. This is the filter area. So what they've done here is they've installed all of the filter piping, and they've backfilled it. So you see the pipe stub outs in this photo here. You can see one of the first structures they started to construct is the backwash equalization basin. The slab was poured, and they're pouring the walls. And then the two clear wells, the slabs both being poured, and then the wall starting to go up on clear well number 1. And I'm having trouble thinking.
Are you overseeing everything from a helicopter, Dennis?
We are. Actually, technology these days is amazing, but they have 2 cameras mounted on very tall poles on the site, and they take pictures, all the time. We're able to select which photos we want. And I'm going to need some help here.
You can look at pictures, click out of it, and go back to it.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
Use
The scroller? Okay.
Oops.
All right.
You find it.
So we're just looking at this photo here. So this is just another photo of the clear well and forms being moved into place. This is a picture of the Colosseum in Rome. Actually, this is the forms going up, and it's these little windows here. That's how
It's Sid's new bird-watching platform.
These little squares that you see on the forms. That's actually where they use those openings to install the concrete. And this is another photo. You can see this form being moved into place and some of the formwork in the foreground. This is a wide-angle shot of this first clear well, and you can see we're closing in on completing the walls on this structure. Once the walls are up, then they'll actually put scaffolding on the bottom of the slab, and then they'll scaffold up and form a dome. There'll be domes on both of these clear wells.
That is a perspective effect of looking like the walls are coming.
Yeah, no, they're straight.
Okay.
Yeah, straight. This is yeah. And this is a shot of the backwash equalization wall construction in progress. This is the in-plant pump station and some of the major piping that connects that to the filters. This is the filter structure under slab piping. As I mentioned before, all the piping is put in place, and then it's in the process of being backfilled. You see the in-plant pump station and the backwash equalization basin in the background. Another shot of the filter structure and more of the backfill having been placed. And then this final photo is the culvert that is at the entrance to our new access road to the plant. So they were able to get this work installed in the drainage ditch in accordance with the permit requirements, and we anticipate that within the next 3 to 4 weeks we'll have our new access road serviceable to the plant site. So in terms of upcoming activities and milestones, we'll continue to work on our SRF loans and our grants for the intake, continue our coordination with PG&E. One of the things that is going to be important here in the next coming months is to coordinate with the Farm Bureau. Starting next May 1st, for 60 consecutive days, Road 22 is scheduled to be closed. So we want to make sure that we get out in front of that and work with the farmers so that they know that the road is going to be closed and that they have alternate access to continue their operations. And again, the reason we're closing Road 22 is so that CH2M Hill can get in and construct the portion of the raw water pipeline that goes under the levees. Permitting, the list is getting much shorter. We have to finalize our Yolo County encroachment permit, as I mentioned earlier, and then we'll continue working with the Health Department on that permit to operate that will be issued once the project is ready to start operation. Property rights, 2 remaining property acquisitions. Harlan Properties at the Willow Slough Bypass, relatively small pieces of property, relatively inexpensive, and then a second piece along the Davis Treated Water Pipeline, which is referred to as the loaded property. These are important because as we get to the SRF item later on in your agenda, before the, assuming they approve that loan, before they will disperse construction funds, these 2 remaining properties have to be acquired. They will allow us to submit an application for a reimbursement application for all the planning and design work that's taken place. That goes back to 2009, so that'll be a very significant amount of money on our initial submittal. But when it comes to the construction, we have to have those remaining properties before those can be dispersed.
Dennis, do you have any concerns about those? Or, I mean, are they moving?
I think
are they easily moving forward or not?
I think we're very close. They're not large dollar items, and we're gonna reach out to both of the property owners and hopefully have that resolved fairly quickly. So this is a schedule of milestones, and as you can see, the emphasis really is almost exclusively on construction activities. Starting in January, CH2M Hill plans to start the work on the Davis finished water pipeline. The Woodland finished water pipeline is scheduled to begin in April of next year, and then the raw water pipeline construction begins in May. And as I mentioned earlier, there's this 2-month closure in May and June when they'll be working on the pipeline segments that go under the levees. We're looking for working with PG&E to have the permanent power on site in 2015. Commissioning of the plant, when CH will start to put the plant through their paces, is scheduled for February, and then they'll actually start their acceptance test in May and have the plant ready to start delivering water in the May-June timeframe. The final completion of the joint intake is October of that year. That's when everything is supposed to be done. So we're in the process over the next several weeks and months, working closely with RD 2035 and with their contractor, Balfour Beatty, to make sure that they're going to have our portion of the plant, of our portion of the intake completed in time for CH2M Hill to do their testing on the regional water treatment plant. And then finally, this is the project cost. This has not changed since our last meeting. The total regional costs remain at about $205 million. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions? Dennis, I just have one question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I had one. You mentioned the PG&E rebates. Did you have any anticipation of that, or is that a new issue?
That was something that we were generally familiar with. West Yost had a fair amount of experience with their program, and so we got together with CH2M Hill, had Terra Verde make sure that they didn't have any additional insight into those opportunities. We've submitted it. We've gotten some fairly favorable feedback on a draft basis, and then we're hoping to finalize that and get our final numbers here in the next month or so.
Cool. Thank you.
What month in 2016 do you anticipate delivering water?
Well, when their test in May of 2016, as it says here in February, they're going to start putting the plant through its paces, and they're going to just run the water in a circle. It's probable that in May, when they start their acceptance test, they're going to want to start sending water into the Davis and the Woodland distribution systems. And that, we want to see them actually run the test for an extended 14-day period and put the plant through its paces, ramp it up, et cetera. So we're working on that now and trying to determine how much water we want to introduce into the distribution system and at what ramp up schedule, and so that we make sure that it goes very smoothly. So there'll be a lot of work over the next couple months to figure out exactly how that happens. The short answer to your question, Dr. Marble, is that in May we could start introducing water into the system, and in June we'd be ready to take as much water as the city's order.
Very good.
Quick question, Dennis. So when Gary just spoke, he said that it sounded like construction costs for the joint intake were going to be a little bit higher than anticipated. I was just kind of curious, sort of what you expect that to be, and is that part of the capital contingency here? Or?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Roughly speaking, our costs are 20% of what the actual costs are. That's the ungrant funded portion. So the way it's set up is what the 20% contribution by the agency that's not grant funded becomes part of the SRF loan.
Okay. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Dennis. Item 4 is to consider adoption of an agency resolution supporting Prop 1, the water bond, and let me just see if there's any questions at all from the group here. I don't think we need a presentation.
I'll move the item.
It's been moved and seconded that this agency support Proposition 1. Any discussion? Comment from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. And item 5 is to consider approving a resolution to adopt a drug-free workplace policy. And I'm going to do the same thing. Is there any questions among members of the agency? We've had the item to read. Any questions or concerns?
I'll
No
move.
questions.
Nope.
Second.
Okay.
I'll defer.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from the public or from members of the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item 6 is to consider approval of 2 agreements. These relate to the way we've operated since inception, where we paid fees to Davis for the treasurer, auditor services, and financial and accounting services. So, Richard, are you doing this, or Dennis, are you doing this?
I'm covering this item, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the agency from its inception has contracted with the City of Davis for a variety of services, including bookkeeping, accounting, office space, and treasurer. And that agreement has continued in effect. Some time ago, as you all know, our treasurer changed employers and came over here to Woodland, but Mr. Novazio continued and continues to serve as the agency treasurer. So what's before you now is essentially a kind of contract housekeeping items involving 2 proposed agreements, a services agreement with the City of Woodland and a services agreement with the City of Davis. As to the agreement with the City of Woodland, this would confirm the role that Mr. Novazio has been playing, and that is he will provide agency treasurer services to the agency through the City of Woodland. There's a contract in your agenda packet that's very similar to the one we had with Davis, and it's structured as a full cost reimbursement agreement. What's a little bit different with this proposed agreement is it's contemplated that on an annual basis as part of the agency budget process, which is developed in close consultation with each of the city staffs, that on an annual basis the cities and the agency staff would figure out and determine what that full cost reimbursement would be, and it will be rolled into the budget that then's presented to this body. And the second agreement is an amended agreement with the City of Davis that would narrow the scope of services under that agreement to confirm that the City of Davis is no longer providing treasurer services, but they do continue to provide bookkeeping and fiscal services for us, and they do continue to provide office space for our two office staff here. And that second agreement is before you, and both contracts are recommended for approval. Regarding review by the city, talked earlier with Mr. Navazio, and that agreement is ready to go to the Woodland City Council here shortly. I talked earlier today with Davis City Attorney Harriet Steiner, and she informed me that the form of agreement that is in your packet is acceptable to her, so that'll be going forward to the Davis City Council in coming weeks. With that, I'll pause here and see if you have any questions.
Questions from any member of the board?
I have a quick question. I'm assuming this is, I didn't notice it in the packet, but it sounded like it was a net zero. We're just shifting money around in this. Is that correct, or is it actually increasing in the budget?
No, in the this current fiscal year budget, we have $75,000 budgeted for both the treasurer services as well as the accounting and bookkeeping services. We don't anticipate going forward that amount is going to increase. In fact, as we get more into a routine operation, it likely to go down. We would anticipate cost of living type adjustments. And of that $75,000, about a third of it is for treasurer services and about 2/3 is the City of Davis. So overall, it's a relatively small amount, but we did want to make sure that we had an agreement in place and a process for making sure that the funds were budgeted each year.
Thank you. Do we need a separate motions? Or?
Any other questions? These be adopted in a single motion, or do we need two motions?
Single motion is okay as set forth in the staff report.
I'll make a motion to approve item 6.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And Dennis, are you handling item 7? Why don't
Yes.
you go ahead.
I'm very, very pleased to bring this item forward for the board's consideration today. I'm going to kind of summarize the key points of the recommendation of the proposed loan agreement, and then Dick is here to answer detailed questions as well. What is requested is approval by this board to enter into an SRF loan that would cover, with the state board, that would cover Davis's portion of the regional facilities. The total loan amount is $95.5 million, $95.461 million. I should point out as well that now that UC Davis has joined the project, it will still be a loan between the agency and the City of Davis, and then through the existing GAPA and specifically the agreement that is expected to be executed between the agency and UC Davis will reimburse the agency for their share, their 1.8 million gallons of capacity. And so out of the $95 million, it's on the order of $12.5 million that will be paid by UC Davis and will be added to the City of Davis's account and offset the City of Davis's costs. The loan term is 30 years. The staff report says the interest rate is 1.62%. Actually, further clarification on that, what we came to learn in the last couple of days since we published the report is the state board's standard practice is to round up to the nearest 1/10%. So the interest rate will be 1.7% over 30 years. That results in an annual debt service of about $4.1 million. $3.6 million of that will be recovered from the City of Davis, about $500,000 from UC Davis. There is a requirement that the loan repayment starts 1 year after the completion of construction, so you don't have to start repaying the loan until that point in time. The agency is required to collect sufficient revenues at 1.1 times that annual amount. So the agency will collect that 1.1 times and then use that extra amount to pay for non-loan costs that the agency incurs for the City of Davis, or if the balance builds up to a sufficient point, the agency would send money back to Davis that's over-collected. We have to comply with Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage, much like what is required on the Woodland loan with the Health Department. There's requirements for compliance with federal disadvantaged business enterprises and other cross-cutters that are described in Exhibit E to the draft agreement. The agency will be required to build up and set aside a separate reserve account equal to 1 year debt payment. So that has to be done within the first year of the loan. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, once the loan is fully executed and put in place, the City of Davis, the agency on behalf of the City of Davis will be able to file for an initial claim reimbursement, and we anticipate that'll be on the order of $12.5 million. So there'll be a large amount of money coming forward once the loan is approved and the initial claim is processed and submitted and approved. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at this end? Any questions at this end? It's the kind of news we like.
Yeah. It's
Dan?
it's great news. I second that. Bill, I just had a question about, and Sid, maybe you can address this, is about UC Davis's participation, and it's, I wasn't quite sure I understood how, I understand in the large scheme how UC Davis's participation affects it, but in terms of this specific agreement, if you could just address that part again. So let's say UC Davis exercises its option,
Right.
which I thought that it already, is that not?
No, we haven't done it formally announced that we intend to.
Okay. So-
I was going to say some comments at the end, but I
Oh, okay.
can't remember if it's appropriate, so.
I just, the point I was wanting to make is that the loan will be between the agency and the state board, and the loan will be supported by the City of Davis water revenues.
Right.
When UC Davis joins the project, in accordance with the agreements that are already in place, about 15% of the loan amount will be paid by UC Davis, and that loan amount, those payments from UC Davis will be credited to the City of Davis.
Right, and that's part of a separate agreement. This agreement, UC Davis isn't
That's right.
mentioned in this
That's
agreement.
right.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Further questions? All right, thank you. We need a resolution here.
And I just, before the board, just one final point in terms of the sequence here. So the board's being asked to take action today. The state board will take action on the 21st, and they will direct the staff to draw up the final agreements that will then be executed. And correct me if I'm wrong, Herb, but the City of Davis will consider this at your meeting on the October 21st. We want to just make sure that there's an opportunity for input and concurrence with what the agency is doing on Davis's behalf.
That's correct. The city intends to take forward a matter to the city council. The resolution in support of the actions that you're taking today, and then also a dedication of revenues towards the payment of the obligations. Those are the items that are going on October 21st.
All right. Well, this is kind of an amazing thing, I think. And we all really ought to be having a little congratulations ceremony here, but we're not until we dot all the T's. We'll be there, but I think Davis ought to make this motion.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to move it. This is fantastic news, yeah.
I will second this motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution by this board. Any further discussion, comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And I really think that this has been so worked on by staff and by past board members to get to this point where we have the possibility of funding at interest rates of 1.7 to 1.8. This is phenomenal news, I think, for both communities and for UC Davis. And I think we all, as a board, join in thanking staff for your tremendous efforts getting us to this point.
Absolutely.
City council in winters has an event like this. There's a box in the middle of the floor and balloons come out.
Well, you know, that's because they have Cecilia as their mayor. I won't say anything more, but she's great. Okay, item 8, consider election of a board vice chair for the fiscal year, which began July 1st. We delayed this action from the last board meeting because of our director, the other director from Davis being about to leave the board. So I don't know that we need an explanation. We just need to take some action here. And
I'd like to nominate to Mayor Dan Wolk for that vice chair position.
And I'll second that motion. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Very good. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Item 9, long-range board calendar.
Yes, this is for the board's information. As you can see, it does not look like we have a tremendous amount of activity or critical items in November and December. If that continues to be the case, we'll likely ask the board to cancel either one or both of those meetings. We'd like to keep it on your calendar just in case something does come up unexpected that needs immediate attention.
Very good. We'll be in touch as soon as we have any inclination that we need to meet.
Right.
And I would just like to make the board aware that on the February calendar date, I will not be here. I'll be at a League of Cities Board of Directors meeting on that date, so I will not be able to be present on the February date. Okay, any other discussion on the calendar? Seeing none, you all have the correspondence. Was there any questions on the correspondence or comments staff needed to make on this correspondence?
These are the progress that we've made on the WAPA power at the joint intake that I mentioned in my presentation. These are the letters that document that.
Great. Okay, comments from our technical team.
I'd like to point out that the City of Woodland local projects are going full bore. Our tank project is operational, and we're in the punch list portion of that project, soon to be completed. Our east trunk line is under construction and will be completed in May in 2015. The west trunk line is going out to bid next week, and we're hoping for some good solid bids on that. We have 2 ASR wells. We had 6 interested parties, and we got 6 proposals back, and so we're very excited about that. We'll be doing interviews in November, and we hope to have a contract before council in December. So things are moving forward pretty rapidly.
Are these 2 additional ASRs?
Yes, there's 2 additional ASR wells, yes.
In addition to the October 21st item with the resolution of support for the funding agreement and a pledging of revenues, we also had an item coming before the City Council with which perpetuates our coordination with UCD for pipeline alignments, and there's some environmental documents that we'll have before the Council on the 21st.
Great.
Yeah,
Mr.
depending on your
Navasio.
schedule, at your next meeting, you'd be scheduled to get the first quarter treasurer's report. If the November meeting is postponed to December, we may endeavor to provide the board that information, offline, and then we'll catch up so you don't have to wait to December. I think that report may be significant in other ways because as the City of Woodland has secured its SRF funding and with the prospect of Davis, while both cities have allocated funds in their current budgets to support this year's JPA program budget, with the SRF funding coming online and being able to access those funding sources, we're working on how we're going to essentially wean the two cities from the responsibility. And so we'll try to include in that report an update on essentially the short-term savings to the two cities for no longer having to provide the funding on a pay-as-you-go. So we'll endeavor to include that in the report, and we can discuss it at your next meeting.
Very good. Yeah, certainly if we, if there's no compelling reason to meet in either November or December, we'll do what we can by writing. We'll ask Mr. Deemer to send out a brief report to members of this board as we've done previously, but we're happy to not have a meeting just to have a meeting.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments from staff? Board member comments? Sid, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. This is the first meeting I've been to since the campus decided to exercise its option. So it was really great news. I think the campus, was able to take advantage of the several years that we had to, as state finances improved over time. All along, everybody recognized this as a legacy project that changes water management in the county for, as far into the future as we can see. So we're very glad to be able to do that. Having said that, we have a lot of work to do in a very short period of time to take advantage of the reality of working with the city on getting the transmission lines through the city of Davis to the campus. So we have not actually executed the agreement yet because once we sign that starts some time periods and some clocks. And we don't want to do that until we have an agreement in place with the JPA, but we do not with the city of Davis yet. And we want to start all those at the same time. We don't want to start a clock on a part until the other pieces are in place. So we're working very closely with the city now. Our design team is meeting every 2 weeks. We have a team that's working on agreements. We're meeting every 2 weeks to try to make sure we get all of our agreements in place. Herb mentioned that we're making sure that the revised environmental analyses that will reflect both the city and the campus's changed routing through the city will include our contribution to the make sure that our routing is analyzed adequately. It was in the original document, CEQA document back in November. Did I bump that? I bumped that, sorry. It was in the original document back in January through March, but we'll reflect that change routing as well. One of the things that I've spoken with Dennis and with Dick about is that we have a contract that in theory we could just execute. But that was, of course, with the JPA, but that, of course, was written in the abstract. Now we're here today. We know funding sources, timings, we know real budgets, and we are going to go over those documents and see if they still reflect what the reality of the current situation is. So in the same time that we're trying to get our agreements with the city in place, we'll be working to make sure that the agreement with the JPA really reflects the reality of the actual implementation of the project. So we'll be working on that at the same time, and we're looking at trying to have everything. The goal we're shooting for is the end of January to try to have all the documents in place and ready to go forward. The idea that we want to be, when the city goes out with its bid package, that we will be part of that bid package and be able to mutually take advantage of the larger project, helping drive down costs for everybody, hopefully. We also had a very good meeting a couple of months ago now with the state to talk about the revolving funds. And one of the things that grew out of that, and I think we owe a debt of thanks to the cities and to the JPA for paving the road for us so that we can also, I think, very quickly move our application package through and be able to get revolving fund funding for the campus-only part of the project as well. So it was I think a very productive meeting, and everybody seems to be in agreement. I mean, we're not nearly as far as you are in that process, but it was very positive. So I've been with the university for 25 years, and always I've been in multiple situations where people have said, well, we can bring you financing, and the university's ability to get inexpensive financing has always trumped whatever anybody else could bring, but there's no way we could trump what the revolving funds might make available to us. So it looks like that's going to work well. I think that's about it. So we've got a whole crew of people that are working on trying to get the various parts moving forward, and hopefully it's just a matter of doing it now. So thank you all.
Any comments, Jim?
Yeah, just a quick one. Just welcome, and I'm glad you guys are moving forward. Hopefully, your contracts will go quickly. I think you kind of summed it up in legacy in that term, and it's good to see that now all the parties are together. The regional parties are together. Everything's working forward, and by the time we turn on the tap, it's it's the whole project together. So I'm excited to have UCD on board, and excited to have Dan on here as well, and we can continue on our work.
Say one thing is I've been very careful with the language. The first meeting I went to on this project was in 1994 when we found out the application for the water right had been applied for, when Jimmy Egan and others let us know. So I appreciate I remember when we were writing, working with Dan, and we're working with Jim and Dennis and others on the press release and everything. It didn't say that we've joined the project, because we've been part of it for 20 years. What we've done is decided to exercise our option. So I was just reminding Jim about the period of time when the water rights applications were split because the city of Woodland decided not to participate. So a lot of history, and the different partners have come and gone over time.
Don?
So Sid, you're kind of sensitive on this point. I wonder what you've chosen for your 25-year honor. Are you going to get a watch? Are you going to get a pin?
Well, it's interesting. I've already gotten my 30-year pin for service, even though I've only worked for 25, because all the time as a graduate student, as a teaching assistant, it all counted. So I've actually got 30 years of service, but only 25 years of retirement credit. That's the difference.
Any comments?
Yes, I think that's why Jim's the politician and Sid you're not, because he just said welcome aboard, and yeah.
And I appreciate that, but it is important to not make us sound like we're new to the project. That's all I'm saying. So.
But I've been an alternate prior to this, so this is my first meeting as a regular member, and I'm very excited. Although I feel like I've been working on these issues for my entire tenure on the Davis City Council, and I just want to say that just in the last few months, it's been unbelievably productive. Both for the agency, but certainly in the city of Davis side, between the SRF loan going through, knock on wood, and in terms of UC Davis exercising its option, and then lastly on the city of Davis side, in terms of our rates that we adopted with only 32 protests, 35 protests, whereas previous iterations had gotten thousands of protests, and we settled litigation. So I think we're making great progress on water, and I'm looking forward in 2016 to getting that water coming our way. So exciting. So thanks.
Wonderful. Just a couple things. First of all, some of us know full well the role UCD has played in this project. My very first meeting 8 years ago, relative to this project prior to a JPA having been formed took place at UC Davis with several UC Davis folks and your cohort, Alan Lilly, and others. So I think we are very pleased to have UCD fully engaged at this point, as we are equally to have the county engaged. This has been a really incredible board to serve with during this time, and somebody needs to write a book at some point in time. I also want to mention, and this SRF thing is part of that book, because I remember the trip to Washington where SRF funding was first planted in our consciousness. Prior to that, SRF funding had not been part of the consciousness of this agency, and it was a meeting at the EPA where we first conjured the idea of possibly two separate SRF sources and of actually pursuing SRF funding. Prior to that, the agency had considered it really not a viable thing, and I think that also proves the importance of those trips that we had back to Washington. So I do want to make sure we acknowledge the county's role as well as UC Davis's role in this. And lastly, we've got some really important work to do as a board relative to securing the necessary state match in this in the funding for the joint intake. We kind of thought we were there when we hit that $10 million mark. I think we sat back a little bit thinking the rest would happen, and we've got to make sure, do everything we can to make sure that happens, and I just want to make sure our entire board's engaged at every level. We hope the water bond passes. If the water bond passes, we hope that we'll have a place somewhere there to get this funding, but we don't know the future, and we do know that we need that funding, and we need it relatively soon. So let's all stay engaged with that. Very good. Any other comments? Anybody against dismissing? Seeing none, we'll deem the meeting adjourned.